Morning, everyone. Good to see you. So before my speech, I'll just give a quick introduction about our firm. So we're generalists in the space. We don't have to own gold miners, which means we obviously enjoy to be tortured a little bit here. But it's okay. We're long-term holders. Value investors, I mean, we basically look for really good undervalued companies and think there's value here. One thing we're trying to do, too, on an institutional scale is add more managed accounts. Right now, we have about $200 million in the precious metal miners and the managed accounts. We have a great experienced team. We have Quell Van Alphen, who just came to us from Tocqueville. She's fantastic. Tocqueville's great. And Sean, the main PM, he's been here for 25 years, which is pretty impressive. It's his only job. And you guys know the reasons to own gold, so I won't go into it. So maybe everyone's seen the movie Mad Max. You know, at the beginning of the year, I was in this big room of pretty sophisticated investors, and I made the case for owning gold. And I made all the arguments that you guys know that were on the last slide. And thereupon, a good friend of mine who works at a huge asset management firm accused me of being a prepper. Now, I'm pretty sure in German or in French, there isn't a word for prepper. So if you don't know, a prepper is someone who lives usually in the United States in the hills, that has guns and gold and a cabin in the woods. They kind of look like these people here. So the guy said, listen, you're a prepper, you own gold. I said, look, actually, I am a prepper. I've got this huge family, I have a cabin, I've got guns, I've got gold, but you also have bad logic. Because if owning gold makes you a prepper, then therefore some of the most sophisticated investors in the world are also preppers. Why? Because central banks, as we all know, are buying gold at the fastest clip in over 50 years. So the guy got a little embarrassed, and that was the end of the conversation. I told him, too, that we know that central banks aren't preppers, which I think is an important point to make. If you own gold, you're not crazy. You're actually being responsible. And it's ironic that those that are creating fragility in the financial markets, namely central banks, are also the ones buying gold. Now, in our prior speeches at the Swiss Mining Conference, we discussed gold as the monetary future. We spoke about memory, imagination, and the miners. Prince Rupert's drop as a metaphor for the disruption of fragile financial markets. And finally, political disruption upending the status quo of these fragile financial markets, which I must say has happened pretty recently. Now, the consistent theme throughout all of these speeches has been that of the mirage of stability. When overpriced securities and a massive debt load are sustained by accommodative central bank monetary policy at a time of disruption, eventually something has to snap, just like the Prince Rupert's drop. And like a seductive bird of paradise, it's a pretty cool bird, we're lulled into a delusion. Gold, on the other hand, a non-financial market monetary asset, provides stability and serves its definition in times such as these. And as we've stated various times to our investors, it's not that we believe the end of the world is coming. We are not preppers. But instead, we believe that the current architecture of the financial system is not sustainable. While the famous Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's partner, thinks you're a jerk if you own gold, that's literally what he says, he thinks you're a jerk, we just think that you understand gold as a necessary diversifying asset for our times. And as I said, once again, it's ironic that those responsible for the current fragility are also the largest buyers. Now, I presume most of you have seen this from the Dutch National Bank. You're not supposed to read from a slide, but I will. This was in October. This is unbelievable. They say, a national bank for the Netherlands, shares, bonds, and other securities are not without risk, and prices can go down. But a bar of gold retains its value even in times of crisis. That is why central banks, including DNB, have traditionally held considerable amounts of gold. Gold is the perfect piggy bank. It's the anchor of trust for the financial system. If the system collapses, the gold stock can serve as a basis to build it up again. Gold bolsters confidence in the stability of the central bank's balance sheet. It's pretty unbelievable. It's quite an admission. Sorry. Big Mac of computers. So let's turn next to ETFs and passive investing. I'm going to tie these two themes in together. I call ETFs, by and large, the big ones, the new activists. Of course, in times gone by, an activist of the old type would build a position, not too big, usually in a specific company, lobby for change via proxy, groups, moral suasion, and hopefully gain a board seat as he or she attempted to optimize the company and make it more profitable for the shareholders, including themselves. While this was sometimes painful and about 50% effective, usually hit the bottom line, it was great. Large index funds, on the other hand, are the new activists. But unlike the old activists, they're interested in entire sectors rather than just one company. This is a super important point. Passive funds are the index. So even if their proposals hurt the interests of minority shareholders and every company they own, they can still deliver their promised performance. Moreover, to the extent that they have an interest in boosting the prices of their holdings, this interest is best achieved by stifling competition amongst firms rather than improving each individual firm. This was a point that was detailed last year by some academics in the Journal of Finance. This was a pretty famous journal article last year. The case they actually show is the monopolistic effects of indexation in the airline industry. And guess what happens? If you're not worried about activists, the old kind, and you're a manager of an airline company, you get pretty lazy. And guess what happens? We all get hurt as a result. Airline tickets have gone up. Moreover, to continue, given their financial market heft, ETFs can force change via phone call or letter rather than the traditional means of shareholder advocacy and activism. As John Coates from Harvard posits in his problem of 12, it's likely that in the near future, roughly 12 individuals will have practical power over the majority of U.S. public companies, end quote. So whatever cookie-cutter ESG criteria these 12 posit will become gospel truth to the market. That's a lot of power. And public markets, in my opinion, were never meant to function this way. Finally, when we add factor-based investing into the mix, we have to seriously wonder if the end of stock picking is dead altogether. Are we therefore, as active managers, the real preppers, preparing for the end of our world? I don't think so. As this graph shows, the dispersion of the mining ETF is massive. This is the GDXJ. It's much more, twice as much in fact, as the S&P, despite having far fewer companies. Thus, the application of active stock picking is at least theoretically greater. And factors, the classic form of French factors, simply aren't applicable in this sector at all. So again, to point this out, this is quite unbelievable. If you get the worst performing stocks in the S&P, sort them from least to greatest, there are 500 stocks in the S&P, obviously, just about. And the dispersion of this index, the GDXJ, that's only 1/5 the size, is twice as much. It's pretty cool. And this is where I think we need to redefine what ESG is. Hold on. You know, we're not talking about things which don't add to competitive advantage when we say ESG, and we're not saying it just to raise a bunch of money. But it's needed because the industry is technical and involves qualitative assessment, involves a non-homogeneous process. Also, the motivations of governance and the managers are pretty darn important. It's not just your grade and tonnage. So therefore, in conclusion, when we couple the current tailwinds for gold, the miners' undervaluation, and the new activists' indexation of financial markets, which leads to the mirage that active managers are the new preppers, we get an incredible opportunity in precious metal miners. This is why we think it's good, at least for our firm now, to expand our managed accounts. Here's one of the companies we own, which George calls the son of Mag. So I don't have to go through it, but there's Silvercrest. It's a pretty well-known company. So one final note, a little bit of encouragement. Don't be afraid to be called a prepper. Gold's one of the few assets that inversely correlates when needed most, and it's no one's liability. So the fact that those adherents of modern portfolio theory don't buy gold says more about their motivations and their weakness. The fact that they don't have a position therein is just a manifestation of the first human tendency in philosophy, which is to keep your job. They don't want to get fired. And it has nothing to do with the assets itself. And of course, the miners are a cheap proxy for the ownership of gold and have yet to incorporate higher metals prices. This makes the long-term ownership of gold miners now more compelling than ever. Looking at the classic adoption curve, therefore, we are the innovators who see the future. We're being responsible. And when we cross the chasm, few will be left to cast aspersions on our investment acumen. That's it. If you have any questions. What happened to the green? Did I go over?
Well, because we have computer problems, we have to switch stuff, so, no, you're perfect.
I could have gone for 30 minutes, Eric.
And I would have liked to have the time to allocate for that, because that was an excellent presentation.
Thanks, guys.